At UCI, we believe in the infinitely curious. We believe in the courageous of thought, the ones willing to fail again and again until one day they don't. When you have the courage to see things differently, to see opportunity where others see impossibility, amazing things will happen. At UCI, we stop at nothing to change the world, to save lives and deliver the extraordinary.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Orange County Forum's first luncheon of 2024. We've termed our luncheon series this year, Critical Conversations. And today's sold-out luncheon is going to focus on a topic that seems to be everywhere in the news today, artificial intelligence, AI. My name is John Christensen, and I serve as the president. And former President Henry Mendoza, I know, is going to sit down and allow those other folks to go. There we go. Thank you, Henry. I serve as the board president of the Orange County Forum, and I'd like to thank you for taking time on this rainy Monday to join us here at the Cove at UCI. Now, during today's program, you're going to hear from a distinguished panel of experts, all who will focus on the good, the bad, and the ugly of artificial intelligence, while also exploring the implications of this emerging technology and dissecting possible solutions for how this sector can be utilized for the betterment of Orange County. Now, before we begin our program, please allow me to make a few introductions and a few acknowledgments. First, please join me in thanking our title sponsor for the fourth year in a row and our host for today, UCI and UCI Health. All right. Additionally, I'd like to thank all of the OC Forum's ongoing sponsors. Your generous support allows us to continue bringing these important conversations, so thank you. I'm fortunate to lead a very talented and energized board of directors who generously give of their time and talent to the OC Forum. You'd be surprised at all of the behind-the-scenes stuff that it takes to do a program like this. So at this time, I'd like to ask all of my fellow board members to please stand and be recognized. OC Forum board members, here you are. There we go. Awesome, thank you. You know, we have a very special guest joining us today. Would you all please give a hearty OC Forum welcome to Rochelle Garza. She is the chair of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Hello, Rochelle. Thank you for being here. And I believe we also have a few elected officials. Are there staffers in the audience? If so, please rise at this time and let us thank you for taking time out of your schedule. Okay, there we are. Thank you. All right, now for the good stuff. As I mentioned before, we've got a great panel today assembled for today's discussion, beginning with our moderator. She's a leading advocate and public policymaker who's played a key role in many critical infrastructure projects at the local and state level across the county and the state. She's a former board president of the Orange County Forum, currently a researcher at the Institute of Transportation Studies right here at UCI, a very big Los Angeles Dodgers fan, and I'm honored to call her a dear friend. Please give a warm OC Forum welcome to Sarah Catz.
I'm also an Angel fan, so just want to throw that out there. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for attending today and braving the weather. Our event is called Artificial Intelligence, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And it's wonderful to see so many people clearly eager to explore the world of AI and its impact on our lives. Out of curiosity, how many of you have used ChatGPT or Bard before? Is there anyone who hasn't? Okay, cool. Of the people who raised their hands that they had used it, how many of you use it practically every day? Interesting. Okay. About a year ago, I was struggling with helping a student that I volunteered to help him with his cover letter. And the cover letter was a mess. I was spending so much time crossing things out and putting my own touch to it. And at some point, I finally said, what am I doing? Let's try ChatGPT. So I put in the job's requirements, I put in his background, and literally within seconds, this amazing cover letter came out. I had to tweak it, but I sent it to him. I did not tell him it came from ChatGPT. And he used it and he got the job. And it was from that day on that I was kind of hooked. So I would say that I'm one of those people who probably use it, either ChatGPT or Bard, every day, most of the time as an extended Google search. But there are definite ways to use it that really help, especially when you're trying to express your thoughts and they aren't coming to you. So for those of you who haven't used it or who aren't using it a lot, I wanted to demonstrate how amazing it could be. So instead of me writing my remarks for today, I told ChatGPT about today's luncheon. I told it what we were going to be talking about, who the panelists were, and literally within 5 seconds, out came the following remarks. AI is undoubtedly one of the most transformative technologies of our time, revolutionizing industries, reshaping societies, and raising fascinating questions about the future. Today we have a fantastic panel of experts ready to shed light on the fascinating and sometimes complex world of AI. We'll delve into the ways AI is already improving our lives, from healthcare to entertainment, while also critically examining the potential risks and ethical concerns it presents. We'll explore the ugly side of AI, consider the possible dangers and challenges we need to navigate as this technology advances. This is not just a panel discussion for the experts. It's a space for all of us to learn, question, and participate in the conversation about AI. We will devote a significant amount of time to Q&A today, so please join us in brainstorming solutions and navigating the future of AI together. By the end of lunch today, I hope you leave with a deeper understanding of AI, its potential, and the role we can all play in shaping its impact on our world. So buckle up. Those are really words I would never use, but. So buckle up, get ready for a thought-provoking journey, and let's explore the wonders, dilemmas, and possibilities of AI together. That was pretty good, right? If I had tried to do that, it probably would have taken me a good hour. So, as you can see, it can be a really helpful tool. So with that, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists today. Our first panelist is Tom Andriola. He's UC Irvine's Vice Chancellor for Information Technology and Data and Chief Digital Officer. His role is designed to ensure the strategic use of data and technology, drive interdisciplinary partnerships, and champion digital strategies that expand UCI's role as a leading research university, healthcare provider, and community partner. He has a broad array of experience in both the public and private sector. I first met Tom last fall. There was an orientation on campus for an AI Innovation Challenge. I was so impressed with him that he was the first person I thought of for this panel. I should add, the team I was on for the AI Challenge did not get shortlisted. Nathan Coulombe is an experienced solutions architect with a demonstrated history of working in the information technology and services industry. He is currently at Impact Solutions in Anaheim and has become quite versed in artificial intelligence. With over a decade of experience across various technical roles, he excels in integrating bleeding-edge technology to solve complex business solutions in the realm of business efficiency and technological innovation. And our third panelist is Don Chmielewski. She's an award-winning multilingual reporter-producer with 12 years of combined broadcast, digital, social media, video, and audio professional experience. She's a former senior editor at Forbes and is currently the U.S. entertainment business correspondent for Reuters. She is also the co-author of Binge Time's Inside Hollywood's Furious billion-dollar battle to take down Netflix. The book has been described as the first comprehensive account of the biggest wake-up call in the history of the entertainment industry, the pivot to streaming. And perhaps AI will be the second biggest wake-up call. So with that, we will now start. Thank you. Thank you for that. Oh. Thank you. So before we get into the real meat of this, I want to ask the panel, and I'll start with Nathan. In layman's term, how would you explain artificial intelligence?
So in most layman's terms, artificial intelligence is really development with less hands-on. It's the idea of letting a computer learn for itself by giving it a very large set of data by which to then try to understand. You give it a defined outcome, some set inputs, and it tries to then find the correct course to get to that output. Sometimes it finds unique ways, sometimes it finds the way that you expect it, and many times it fails along the way.
And Don, recently we started hearing the term artificial general intelligence. Would you mind explaining what the difference between that and what Nathan just explained?
So, artificial intelligence uses a set of, data to produce an output following the instructions of, the queries that are structured. Artificial general intelligence is akin to sentience. So the machine begins to learn, begins to anticipate, conducts its own exploration, which is where OpenAI is at this point. You'll recall recent news stories about the CEO of OpenAI being thrown off the board and then rejoining the board with some impetus from the Microsoft, just a $14 billion investor in the company. Our reporting, through the course of our reporting, my colleagues in Silicon Valley learned that one concern was that he was taking OpenAI in this direction of artificial general intelligence, or basically machine sentience. So, and more recently, Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook has talked about this as his next ambition. So it's on the horizon.
Thank you. I want to look at how AI is currently improving our lives in different sectors. Tom, I think your expertise is really healthcare and education, correct? So how is AI currently improving our lives in those sectors?
So AI is already here, we're all using it. If you use maps to get to this facility, you are using AI. If you're like me and can't text in a traditional sense and you dictate your text to talk to your kids or grandkids, you're using AI, right? So we're all already using these things. I think if you start thinking about different industries are going to adopt it at their own paces and in their own ways. Let's take a look at, healthcare is an interesting one because you have a tremendous element of do no harm, and so these types of tools are very exciting. They're also very concerning. But let me give you a real, tangible, real example of how the use of these tools, you will try to hear me not use the word AI and talk about tools, because that's what they are. It's just a new tool. So there was a test that was run by a couple of academic medical centers in the country. We were part of that. Basically, could you take the patient summary that gets generated after you visit a patient, and could you generate that with generative AI? So they did that, and they had ChatGPT do it, and they had a human do it. If you know anything about the medical industry, as a doctor, you're seeing 18, 20 patients a day, and you're writing those summaries typically at night, after dinner, maybe a little grumpy because it's been a long day and you'd rather be doing something else. So when they compared the results, it was very interesting. Result number one was the doctor typically wrote 4 to 5 sentences. ChatGPT wrote 4 to 5 paragraphs. Doctor used a lot more kind of medical terminology. ChatGPT wrote more plain English understandable for the common everyday person. ChatGPT also was more empathetic, or perceived to be more empathetic, because we told it to be. And even though we always talk to the medical professionals about being empathetic, maybe just not up to it at the moment. But here's the other interesting thing. So some of those you say, well, I predicted or I read. Here's some of the things that weren't in the paper. So first of all, we didn't turn over the summary to ChatGPT. There was still human in the loop. And it's a very important concept that we all should really keep in mind. Human in the loop was, it wrote 3 or 4 paragraphs, but the doctor read those paragraphs and had the right to edit it and hit the final send. So there was human in the loop. We didn't turn over automation of the task to the computer. Okay? And when we asked the doctor, well, did you save time? The answer came back, well, I actually didn't save that much time because I did have to review, now not 3 or 4 sentences or 3 or 4 paragraphs, that took me more time. But it was, the cognitive load was a lot less rather than having to write something from scratch. And this is something we hear a lot that Sarah, you talked about in terms of writing your summary statements for today. So here's a great example of, we got a new tool, we figured out a simple way to implement it into a common workflow. We learned a lot along the way. And I like to tell this story because the last statement, we learned a lot along the way, is something we all need to engage in. Every one of us needs to look at how we do our work, how we spend our time, the value of where our time goes, and say, can these tools make us better? I think instructors are starting to look at this more and more. We're actually running a pilot program incenting instructors who really want to start playing with these tools to start experimenting them with different pedagogical techniques in different subject areas. And so I think what we're going to see over time is that these things will become more assistive and augmentative before we ever talk about automation.
And just a corollary to that, OpenAI just announced a recent partnership with Arizona State, tutoring, creative buddies, writing assistants. UCI has something like that, right?
Yeah, we started down that road too. I think they put out a very public announcement, and it was really their stage. And I was talking to members of their organization after the announcement came out. They really wanted to make a statement about we're all in that these schools are going to be transformative over a longer period of time. It's not going to change our world tomorrow, but they want everyone at the university to lean in. They know students are leaning in a major way because they're just more comfortable with these tools as they come out to our world. So they really wanted to make a statement of it. And then the whole idea of partnering with OpenAI, and it's not the only organization that provides these tools that they work with, is how do you approach it in a way that protects privacy, can be deployed equitably, right? Because all of us, especially in higher education, we think about the equitable access and use of these tools to close disparities in our society rather than exacerbate them.
Thank you very much. Don, same question, but through entertainment.
So, since we all live in Southern California, you are all aware that artificial intelligence became a major stumbling block in negotiations between Hollywood writers and actors and film studios. It was, the industry, like every industry, has begun to experiment with applications of AI. And there are, what the industry considers low-hanging fruit. It's a way to accelerate visual effects, for instance, or do color correction on film. Netflix and other companies are experimenting with the ability of AI to begin dubbing, to do dubbing into multiple languages. For a company like Netflix, with its global distribution in 190 countries, it actually does what the industry refers to as localization. So it will take the performance in its native language and then dub it in multiple languages so that it can be accessible to audiences around the world. And it turns out that AI not only can perform this task of dubbing, but it can also do it in the voice of the performer. which is not the norm. So normally there's Tom Cruise, and then there's Tom Cruise in Spain, and Tom Cruise in Germany, all local language speakers, and for those who live in Spain and Germany, that's how Tom Cruise speaks. So now we're at the point where Tom Cruise can deliver his lines in English and then be dubbed in Mandarin and Spanish and whatever language Netflix chooses. So those are some of the potential benefits. But and we will obviously look at the other side of the coin. But for writers and for actors, this technology poses an existential threat. For writers who are compensated for very highly for producing the first, coming up with the notion of a film and then writing the first draft, they're very highly compensated for that task, which is hard. And they fear having to deal with, in their words, a crappy first draft of something that was generated by machines, which are really good at providing, composing, but don't necessarily match the creativity of a Hollywood screenwriter. And for actors, the threat is even more grave. AI has already been used to replace actors, background performers in particular, to generate, basically video game characters who populate the screen. And for actors who are simply, who are just breaking into the craft, oftentimes performing as a background actor is the first step on that rung, and that's how it can lead to other roles. And so for young actors, particularly young ones, they see it as potentially threatening to their livelihoods.
Thank you. Nathan, kind of want you to clean it up, meaning give us the good parts in business and any other sector you want to cover.
Sure, to kind of everything else. Yeah, obviously everyone is really looking at AI these days and how can we leverage it, right? And that can range from as simple as, I need to write this email, I don't have time to think about it, give me a first draft. And frankly, that's how I use it a lot today. But at the same time, I find that there's a lot of risks within businesses to be too quick to lean on AI and not think about it, right? We've already seen some instances of this where maybe somebody is getting let go or fired and the person doesn't want to deal with writing that email, and they let ChatGPT do it, and it makes some mistakes that they didn't catch. So it's imperative that people maintain that understanding of the human connection that is still important, and we don't let AI replace that, but still be able to leverage that as a tool to really power businesses going forward. Some of the things that AI is really great at is kind of predictive analysis, feeding it in large sets of data, things where people would normally be building a ton of reports to try and understand maybe what's going to happen in their market in the next year, 2, 3, or 4 years. And AI can take those large data sets and identify patterns that humans might not, and point to things that you might not have thought of. At the end of the day, a human should still be the one looking at that data and that feedback and making the final decision, but having that AI as an additional bit of data context is huge. And that's really where I see the majority of a lot of this going forward for the big generative AIs. For the smaller, more niche application AIs, I think that's really where a lot of more powerful applications will be, right? This general purpose AI is going to get a lot of people excited about potentials, but once you start giving a more narrow focus to an AI, you can have a lot more predictable results, and you get a lot less of the things you may have heard about, like ChatGPT hallucinating. That's because it has big, wide, free range. When you narrow down an AI's focus, it can be a lot more reliable. And those are the AIs that you've all been using already, right? Anyone who's applied for a job in the last 10 years, your resume was looked at an AI before a human saw it. And in that case, an AI is really good at filtering out some of the basics, right? So there's a lot of really broad scale applications for AI there. Again, there is a lot of things that worry me too when you start talking about things like computer vision. Tesla very loudly announced that this version 12 of their full self-driving has no code determining how the car drives. It is entirely based off of a neural network in terms of videos of humans driving and reacting in the real world. That means the car no longer knows what a stop sign actually is. It just behaves the way humans seem to when this sign is on the road. we're in trouble. Correct. One of the important stats that came out from this study is what percentage of people actually come to a full and complete stop at a stop sign? Less than half of 1%, which means the AI doesn't stop for a stop sign either, because humans don't. So there's a lot of things that we then have to start questioning about how we build our society in terms of law and structure to make things better for all of us.
If I can share an example, I heard last week, I was at CES, the big conference, and that happens in Las Vegas. It's actually really, I think it's an example everyone can understand, and also how every organization that I talk to is talking about how do I reskill my workforce around using these tools. So we were talking about call centers, talking to someone who's in the call center business. They were talking about, now what happens in a call center is the conversation between the agent and the customer is now transcribed in real time. It's fed into a GPT type engine, and the response is actually generated on screen, and the agent essentially is reading that script. That's how accurate it is, and as close to real time was one of my questions. It's like, it's almost real time. Well, think about that. So now you got an agent who just started this morning, who's as good as an agent who's been there for 9 months. So you're talking about bringing new people into the organization, and retraining your people, leveraging their time differently, etc. Scaling becomes a whole different thing in terms of scaling your business. Then I heard the hallucination story. I thought was fascinating because the model is being, so in any given interaction, there's a conversation going back and forth. Well, this happened to be CarMax's call center. So, CarMax offers these types of financing options. Well, the customer accidentally said Carvana instead of CarMax. So guess what all the prompts that were now being seen said? They were all now saying Carvana. Because the mom didn't know that they were actually working for CarMax. And so when someone's job was to review how these interactions go, right, for quality assurance purposes, someone has that job to review, and they're like, what the heck's going on here? Why is our agent talking about our competitor? And then go back and tweak the model, right? So it just shows you there's amazing opportunities in changing the way work gets done, using your employees differently, and then these little weird things that happen that you wouldn't expect until they come up.
So I was going to give an example of how Reuters, which is one of the world's largest news organizations, is already using AI in specialty products, as you suggested earlier. So we have products that are geared for the legal community, and if anyone here is a lawyer, you know that finding relevant case law can be a time-consuming, somewhat tedious process. So we now have a product that is developed through AI and vetted that will begin to reference all of the relevant case law and provide a first draft of your legal filings, which is an enormous time saver for those in the legal profession, because we're Reuters and we fact check absolutely everything. You don't have to, and we don't allow for hallucinations because all of the data is trained on our published material and public records. So there's, this is one product that is actually a time saver, and I hope doesn't eliminate jobs of entry-level legal professionals. Like paralegals, for example, we similarly the newsroom has a sandbox to begin to experiment with the use of this tool. It is again trained on Reuters' corpus of published material, so we know that's all fact checks and not strange stuff found on the internet and some random blogger or doesn't contain hate speech or other imagined information. And we've been using it just to see how it can speed up the process, because a lot of our reporting, because a lot of our news clients are traders. One of our biggest investors is the London Stock Exchange, and they invest in us because they want fact-check news delivered quickly to terminals, investor terminals around the world. And indeed, it's very effective at going through these voluminous SEC filings. And so while we don't currently use AI in our news product, because we have to be fully, all the information that we provide to our clients is vetted. There's a day coming fairly quickly where some version of AI will be able to provide a quick summary of legal filings much more rapidly and accurately than human journalists like myself. So those are a couple of applications.
I'm loving this. I hope you all are too. getting to the bad and the good, the bad and the ugly. There's maybe many of you in here, especially those that are younger, who don't know who George Carlin is. George Carlin was a very famous comedian. He made himself famous using cuss words to get people to laugh. Like he had the 7 famous words or something like that. He died at least 10 years ago. Well, all of a sudden, a George Carlin comedy episode has come out. I think this just happened last week. And it's George Carlin through AI having a whole session on comedy. And of course, the heirs of George Carlin are furious. But I want to go over to Don and just say, okay, what do we do? Like, take it from here.
Yeah, I mean, as with every technological innovation, the law always lags innovation. We've seen that from the time that Napster first, sort of crested on the scene and sort of copyright enforcement. So there was no existing law to crack down on the theft of songs. Similarly, since the Grammys are coming up on I believe the 4th of February, we all know that there was a new release from Drake that was not Drake. It was a music producer who used these tools to compose a song in the style of Drake. So the music industry right now is attempting to grapple with emerging technology. Unlike the days of Napster, it is actually approaching this in a more nuanced way. It's working, for example, with YouTube, which has developed a set of tools for its millions of creators, which would allow budding composers to hum a melody, and the software will actually convert it into a guitar line or a drum set performance based on this melody. And there are other tools that will build music around an original melody. All of it's all AI enhanced. But the downside is that there's currently a lawsuit pending in which Universal Music, which is one of the world's largest music publishers, has accused Anthropic, which is an AI company, of using all of its composed works as the training data. And when queried about when the software is queried about composing a song about the day Buddy Holly died, it will generate the lyrics to American Pie, which is problematic in the eyes of Universal because no one is being paid. It appears to be a theft of work, and it's often the case when you have this tension between technology and technological innovation and law. This case will be vetted in court, and the courts will have to decide whether what the technology is doing is a fair use of copyrighted works and therefore permitted because it's using the copyrighted work to create something wholly new, or if it's a copyright infringement, in which case the penalties are $150,000 per instance. So you can see how the bill would end quite quickly. And there's similar examples in the realm of photography. Getty Images, which is one of the world's leading repositories of photographic works, is suing, has a similar suit about using its collection of copyrighted works to train some of these AI products that can generate images. Not terribly well, but it'll get there.
And Sarah Silverman and the New York Times have suits. So, Nathan, we have a presidential election this year. It's going to be very intense. I see that OpenAI is trying hard to make sure there aren't deep fakes or whatever the terms are. What are you hoping for? What are you seeing out there?
Oh, man. Oh, well, I'm certainly worried because there is a lot of potential for deep fakes, even fake articles, just things that sound like they could be real to people who are looking to hear specific words, right? And I do believe that companies like OpenAI are trying their best to prevent this from happening. That said, their best isn't always cutting it. There's an entire realm of AI research that's called prompt hacking. And within the cybersecurity community, it's a huge focus currently, specifically in this idea of ChatGPT, for example, is not supposed to create certain pieces of media based off of legal requirements. You can trick it into doing that anyway, right? You can tell it certain circumstances and get it to still create copyrighted material. One of the ones that was recently patched involved basically convincing ChatGPT that, no, I'm creating this for 70 years down the line after the copyrights expired. So, oh, okay, here you go. So that's a problem, right? And I do believe they are trying their best to prevent it, but at the end of the day, it's a game of cat and mouse, and there's a lot of mice out there that are going and trying to run around. So there's a lot that worries me there in terms of what could be still generated.
To me, this is one of the scariest parts of AI. So, I mean, there was already that ad with Joe Biden, but it really wasn't Joe Biden. So, Tom, unless you have something you want to say about that, I have a question for you.
I'm just hoping your next question is easier than the one you just gave me.
And I feel bad because I just came up with that and I had not warned Nathan. But you handled it great. When we were doing our research for the AI challenge, we were in the health vertical. We came across a lot of articles that talked about bias and inequities that AI causes. Are you comfortable talking about that and what we need to look out for? And
there's a softball for you.
As comfortable as I'm going to be. I mean, it's a big issue, right? Because, first of all, as humans, we're biased, right? And as humans, we end up creating this data and we translate it into the way that these algorithms behave. And we've seen that in countless situations already. But there are things that I find really interesting, like you can tell these tools to not be biased, and I don't actually even know what that really means, how it actually behaves. But I think we have to remember that our human biases are going to enter into these models because we generate the data that goes into them, we train them, right? So those biases are going to be there. I think when you think about the kind of things that we need to build in terms of frameworks, whether it's individual, as thinking about it, how I use it, or how the organization I'm a part of, or how government entities put guidelines and guardrails around the appropriate use of these things. We have to ask ourselves tough questions earlier in the process about things like fairness, bias, equity, access. I think we're coming back to the access question, right? We dealt with 20 years of the digital divide, who has access, to the digital world and not. Well, we got that up into the 90+ percentile. Now we're coming back to a new era of these tools built on top of that, on top of the digital economy. It's like, how do we make sure? Just think about university. We have 37,000 students. 44% of them are Pell Grant recipients. How do we make sure that those students don't get left behind just because they can't afford the $20 a month to get access to ChatGPT 4? Right, so you have these access issues. So I think bias is going to be a part of our conversation. I think organizations are going to be held accountable to explaining how the tools that they put into their products or into their interaction points, how they don't create more disparity in our society. And if I know anything, especially about this most recent generation, Gen Z, who puts a lot of stock into where they put their dollars, or in the case of my kids, where they put my dollars. In companies that care about things, whether it's the climate or it's equity and those types of things. So I think it's going to be something that's going to be in the conversation.
Thank you. I'm going to throw this open to all three of you. Who should be responsible for regulating and overseeing AI development, and how?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I mean, first of all, I don't need to say any one person. I think we always see this with technology. Technology can move very fast. Policy is behind trying to figure out how to put guardrails after the horse is out of the barn. The legal frameworks in our society struggle to figure out how to generate the case law, to support those guidelines. I don't think there's any one person. I think we need public and private sector and the foundations at the table working together on some of these issues. I really think it's kind of an all-in thing. I mentioned earlier, one of the meetings earlier, it's like, we used to talk about geopolitics, which would by kind of, the military world order and the economic world order. We now have the digital world order. We big data happened, now we're trying to figure out how to deal with it. But these technology companies have so many resources. We build these models on top of their infrastructures that are of scale that no any one organization or even the collection of universities in the United States couldn't match at this point. We need people at the table working collaboratively together to keep this thing within the boundaries that it's for good and not ripping apart our society.
So I might be showing a bit of my nerd colors here, but I agree as far as the legal side always lags behind, and I think that you would always face challenges trying to centralize the control of all of that. My real belief is that I think the most valuable thing we can do in terms of that control is enforce transparency on these companies. I think closed source development has worked for a long time, but I think with the level of impact these technologies have in the world, we can't really afford to not be able to inspect how they work, what their models contain, and why they do what they do. I think if we can enforce that, that gives us a lot better ability to know what's happening and rule out the bad actors within the space. I think that's the short version for me.
Yeah, I think it's a shared burden. I think that there's obviously a role for the platforms which distribute and make technology accessible to all of us, and the issue of deep fakes and misinformation promulgated around the elections. I think that the platforms have a role here in preventing garbage from recirculating through our culture and becoming perceived as factual. But regulators, but we've also seen from the last election cycle and how, for example, Facebook responded to the falsehoods on its platform, that there's also a role of regulators here to sort of press technology companies to do the right thing. The problem is that the resources are not equal, so government doesn't have the resources of these multi-billion, in some cases trillion-dollar companies like Apple. So it's a real challenge, but the stakes are enormous, as we discussed earlier. So there has to be some sort of public, some sort of civic mission on the part of these platforms, but also a mission that's reinforced both from a regulatory standpoint, and when that fails, the courts will have to be sort of a venue of last resort for imposing some sort of limitations and guardrails.
Are any of you worried for our youth in terms of jobs? Like when they go out for jobs, will there be a whole lot less jobs for them?
Go for it.
Good.
It was really interesting to talk to as economists, and there's actually a field called historical economists. And they'll share with you things like, only 21% of the jobs that existed in 1960 exist today, right? Our economy, especially our economy, is always moving, right? I mean, we're always generating new jobs. I'm on record saying, AI is not going to take your job. It's the person who knows how to use AI is the one that can take your job, at least in the near term. I believe, especially with our economy, just the level of ingenuity, innovation, entrepreneurship, I think we'll be continuing to create new jobs where we find the ways to automate things. Just like in the way that the manufacturing industry, as they automated the way the plant worked, they created a whole new set of jobs that became the jobs that people went into. So there's going to be job destruction, but there's also going to be job creation. The question is how as a society do we keep up with that cycle such that we don't create two societies?
Yeah, I agree. As far as like large-scale white-collar jobs, things will shift, right? You'll go from people who are feeling displaced by AI to people who are leveraging that AI to do things that they might have used to do. My concern really is just that the pace of this change continues to accelerate over and over and over, even across my life. And I do worry for young people in terms of if they're in school today, is that even going, like what they study, is it going to have any application on what they're doing professionally? Because even in my own lifetime, I've seen that shift. that the other big challenge for me is really the blue collar jobs, the ones that might be more automated, that might become more displaced, things that have traditionally been entry points into the workforce for people. And how do you still ensure that those people have ways to get education and then get into a higher paying career and provide those stepping stones? That's really where I see a lot of displacement in the future.
I mean, I remember talking with a studio executive who's from one of the major studios up in Hollywood. We were talking about AI, and he said, you know, a century ago, 90% of people in America worked on a farm. So, you know, we still are able to eat, and yet we don't need quite that many resources devoted to, you know, agrarian purposes. But that said, I think that there is, you know, some jobs will be able to be reskilled. But for the actor who is replaced by a synthetic human, I'm not sure that the actors will all have a livelihood, or maybe it will be just a handful, and the others will have to find some other way to support themselves. I think that that's a legitimate fear. I talked to one researcher who said, you know, the actors are in trouble. He used a different word. But, yeah. And this was someone developing the technology. So I think that there's a legitimate fear that some people will be displaced.
I was at a wedding in July and met this lovely young man who did voiceovers, and the strike had just started. And he was very concerned that he would not be able to get back into voiceovers because AI was taking over voices. So I tried to make him feel better, and I said, oh, I've heard those voices, they're terrible. They sound like robots. But it's getting more sophisticated, and I think Don is spot on. So as you heard earlier, ChatGPT offered all of you a long Q&A session. So I want to give you all that opportunity. I think there's going to be a lot of questions. I hope there is. Georgie, who does the mic, and yay.
Thank you very much, by the way. As a military veteran, one of my biggest fears that I have is I drove tanks in the military. I was in Germany, so I know about technology from the military. My fear is one day our enemies are going to know our tactics, our skill sets, our tank systems, our elements. How do you alleviate that fear for the veterans, for the Homeland Security, and for our future? Thanks.
Well, I'll start out just saying it's already happening. It's happening in Israel. A friend of mine's cousin is in the military, and he's stationed up north near Lebanon. And they are not allowed to use their cell phones anymore because AI was telling the enemy where they were, and all of a sudden all these IDF soldiers were getting murdered. And it was clear they knew what was going on. So that might be a minor use of AI, but it's very effective, and it's scary. I don't know if our experts have any opinions, but.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure I can alleviate the fear, but the experts in the field also share in a lot of that, right? So people are aware that we are considering a lot of these sorts of things in terms of, you know, the point of data is like phones. Cell phones are a humongous data point. We are becoming more and more cognizant of just how much leakage of data is going around, right? Especially once you start talking about actual vulnerabilities within devices where we can turn on a microphone without the user knowing, and now you're not just knowing where someone is, you can record the sounds that are going on and maybe overhear orders that are being given. So there's absolutely a lot of thought going into that, and at least on the US side, I know that they are starting to take measures in terms of what is being sent out and what you're allowed to bring out into combat zones with you in terms of connected devices.
Thank you for the discussion. I'm wondering, do you see a future in which works of art, literature, music, will be labeled as generated by AI or augmented by AI? Do you see a future of that actually happening?
Well, the Hollywood trades are definitely advocating some sort of a labeling process. And what's interesting is the way the copyright laws are written, you can't copyright machine-created works. So, so if you're in the business of creating films or fine art, you have no way to protect the work if it's the work of a machine. So it has to be human-made in order for the copyright laws to protect your work, because the copyright laws are designed to incentivize creativity. So for right now, if you are hoping to make money from a work, either composition of whatever ilk, it has to be made by a human, and there's some efforts now by industry groups and also corporations like Universal to have works labeled as human-made.
Hello. Getting back to the bad and the ugly, could you talk a little bit about how AI is being introduced into terrorism?
Yeah, same sort of thing, right? Where we're talking about, they're looking at large data sets. So they're collecting phone data, messaging data, radio frequency data. They're looking at what's being pinged through the satellite signals. A lot of these things can start to be, if not intercepted, at least detected when things are going off. And recognizing patterns is what, again, the AI is really doing for them, is it's saying, hey, there's a bunch of activity going on here, this is where we should look for, and recognizing patterns of when our scheduled routes are going, when people will be certain places. A lot of those sorts of things are what is amplifying those sides of terrorism. The other thing to think about with the terrorism is that it's not going to be limited to physical acts of violence and terrorism. A lot of terrorism these days is transforming into more stochastic sorts of terrorism, where they are making sure that there is, news that is stoking arguments between people, creating the disparity between the two sides, creating more and more division within the country. So that's where a lot of that sort of fake news stuff is coming from. I would consider that a form of terrorism personally.
Yeah, I was going to add that. I call it cyber terrorism, right? It's really using concepts of cyber, and I always find it fascinating, not surprising, that whatever these new tools are, it seems like the bad actors move the most quickly to take advantage of them, and I think that is true in kind of what we see in the cyber terrorism is very, very quickly, very, very the ability to deceive you is just becoming more and more complex. I found it terrifying the first time I saw the phone call that comes in. It sounds like your daughter been kidnapped, ransom money. Those types of things to me are terrifying, and I think they would terrify any one of us. And those things happen so quickly. A couple of years ago, you needed about 3 hours of recorded time to be able to mimic someone's voice. Now it's down to something incredible, like 20 seconds is all you need to be able to mimic my voice. So I think what we're going to see is that the velocity and the deceptiveness of these things are going to just continue to be a challenge. I actually sent, the first time I saw one of those kind of stories, I sent it to my parents just to say, hey, they might target their generation more than me. And of course the response was, and you think we would pay money to get your kid back?
To that end, I've become very paranoid about some of these stories I hear. And when I had my latest iPhone update, it knocked my greeting off my phone. So now it's just an automated, you've reached this number, leave a message. And I was going to change it, and then I thought, no, I don't want my voice on it in case somebody wants to replicate it. And now, when I have a number that I don't recognize, I pick up the phone. If I want to pick up the phone, I pick up the phone, and I don't say hello first. I wait for them to say hello. And maybe that's being ridiculous, but that's what I'm doing.
Also, building on some of these conversations we've just had, it makes me wonder about sort of at the global level, what conversations are happening between major governments, China, Russia even, our competitors in the world that might some way protect us. Because if we have China going one way, if we're going another way, are you aware of any conversations between governments that are trying to rein this in?
Well, I can't say that I have any, knowledge of specific conversations between those governments, but I know that China, for example, is definitely investing heavily in AI. They know the value of it. There's a reason TikTok is on all of your kids' phones, and that's where a lot of these posts are happening. All that data is getting fed through models, right? What they're necessarily doing with it is definitely a little bit more opaque, but you can start to imagine what valuable data you can have just having that level of deep insight into everyone's lives.
Okay, I'm going to try and pull us back from the brink. Short of being a Luddite, how do we engage with this? I'm Gen X, so I'm on the edges of being familiar or comfortable with technology, but what do we do other than just use it, which sounds so simple. And I'm one of those people that I've tried ChatGPT to draft emails, but I don't use it every day. I gotta get comfortable with it. I mean, is it a class? Is it just using it every day? It sounds so simple, but how do we, those of us that aren't the digital generation, get into it so it isn't as terrifying as all of these questions are?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very pragmatic question, right? I'll talk a little bit about like how we try to approach it, right? Because you and I both work here at the university. We have us Luddites. I think there's about 28,000 of us, and then there's 37,000 of the digital natives. So I think people, and I was one of those lucky people that was kind of inside the internet tornado when it happened, right? Which was probably the closest thing we have to what we're going through right now. I think people have to experience it for themselves, and that's why what we started was let's really encourage people to just get in there and play with it, and figure out if they can do something. Plan your next vacation, to New York City, Washington D.C. See how it, just get to interact. I always tell people, if you haven't done this, it's a simple thing to do. Take a Google search, because we all Google search, and turn one of the tools on right next to it, and just see the difference between the responses, and decide which one you're going to go to. Because you'll start to understand where you want to use this tool versus where you want to stay with Google. And then I think we start to figure out, how can I make my life a little bit easier? Is this something that I can do with my kids? So I think you have to experiment first, and then you get to a comfort level. Because if you think about it, you didn't interview anybody in the past 2 years who said, well, I've heard of the internet, but I have never really used it. Is it really required for the job? But there was a time that was a ridiculous question, right? And so I think we'll become more comfortable with this, but it's a personal journey, is what I've learned. And so what we've tried to do here is help people get started in the journey. One of the common questions that comes up, I think with lots of people is, well, if I put my data in this thing, does that mean does that mean OpenAI's got it when they do the next version of their model? We've created a protected environment so that if our instructors are trying to do things for their classes, that their information is protected. So we're just trying to give people the scaffolding to get more comfortable, recognizing that people will determine at what pace they move through that.
And you heard me say earlier that I use it mostly as a Google extended search. And when you put something into Google, there's all these sponsored links, and you have to go through so much junk to get to the answer you need, whereas ChatGPT will just, spurt it out. Also on my LinkedIn page, I took a Udemy class for $9.99. I think that's how you pronounce it. And it was fantastic. And I posted that link and a link to another class. So I'm happy to give you those links, but they were very basic, and now I feel I'm an expert. So.
Well, and also just to reel it back, like you said, from the brink of destruction there. If you are just going onto a public GPT and playing with it, my rule of thumb, if you're not comfortable posting it on Facebook, don't type it into the box, right? If it's something you're okay with posting on Facebook, it's probably nothing that personal or sensitive, so you're fine to kind of do that prompt. And then for those of you who want to kind of take that next step of like, okay, I can use GPT for little things. How do I really engage with AI and try and drive this conversation forward? What I mentioned earlier with prompt hacking is the best first step. It takes zero technical knowledge. All you're doing is you're trying to get it to do something it says it's not supposed to do. come up with examples, just try to outsmart it, talk to it like a person, like you're trying to trick somebody over the phone. You'd be surprised with what you can get it to do, and then you find it did something it shouldn't, post about it, and you're helping contribute to improving AI for everyone.
I think there's a question at table 6.
Hi, I'm here representing a public utility, water utility. And we're usually 10 years behind on tech. But we're really interested in AI, and we're hosting a workshop. And what we're struggling with as a public utility is the private nature of what we do, and putting that on something like ChatGPT and not getting out. So I'm really curious, you said you developed something private that allows you to just share internally. How do public agencies get something like that where they can keep it, internal? And then also, how do we start setting up policies on how to use this at a public agency or in a business, right? What are our rules and regulations internally around that? Do you guys have any advice?
So something I work with a lot of small to medium businesses who are all in that same boat of, we are really excited about this, we want to start using AI, but maybe we've been lagging behind in terms of technology. The first step I tell everyone is to start with data governance. You need to understand what data you have, where it's coming from, how well you trust it, and how you might be able to leverage it. And then we can start looking at what AI tools make sense to do with that. As far as the actual bringing a private GPT online, I'm sure you can speak a little more specifically about how you guys brought that up. But there's open source options. Basically what you're doing is you're pulling the actual software into a local copy and you're saying, I don't want to use their model, I'm using my own model. Which means you do need to have all of that data, which is why I say you kind of start with that governance first so that you have a good model to build off of.
I'll just add, because you mentioned policies, right? Some types of organizations have to put out policy statements very, very quickly to basically say, and don't do this, right? Example, your healthcare organization. Don't put patient information into ChatGPT. Right, and so you may be an organization, you may have to make some quick statements just to put basic guardrails while you're trying to figure out more sophisticated things out. I don't know enough about the specific situation, but sometimes that's really necessary. And then, policies are hard, because they take time and you need to get a lot of kind of input and depth through what are we trying to accomplish in passing a policy. So I think that part will take time unless you have some real, definitely don't do this, or don't put this type of data in there because it becomes immediately exposed to the outside world, and that's very bad for us.
So I wanted to ask a question with regards to the advancements in the workforce. We've already gone through a challenge where we've gone from the industrial age to now, and we're losing jobs. Jobs are changing in how they're done, and with the advent of this type of technology, that's going to further change jobs. So is there things that should be done, whether it's on the workforce side, government side, where we could better educate people and better prepare people so they're ready to embrace these technology and use it in, what future jobs look like?
I'd say that one of the biggest things that I run into is really making sure business leaders understand the phrase that you mentioned earlier, human in the loop, right? None of these technologies today, in my opinion, are really ready to replace a human. They're ready to take one person and let them do the job of maybe 2 or 3 people without AI, but they're not necessarily replacing people, right? It's all about giving you more scalability, maybe letting you, be more accurate, improve your viability with a lot of that. For the actual workers side, I give the same kind of advice I would give people who are just curious. Start playing with AI, because if you're not starting to play with it, your employer certainly is. And if you find a good novel use case for it and can show that you take that initiative, your employer is more likely to say, let's start finding other ways to leverage this person, make sure they can use those AI tools.
And I'll just add, because I think right now in the United States, we've got a pretty good focus on workforce evolution, right? You talk about the CHIPS Act and industries that we want to rebuild, rebuilding manufacturing. So I think the mechanism, the policies and programs coming out of Washington is there. I think what we've talked about here locally and with what we do as UCI, it's what's our role in that, right? I mean, one of the reasons we want to be very kind of forward-leaning on this is we want to make sure our students leave here with enough
understanding and competency to go out and get the jobs out there, where this is going to give them the ability to get a great job just over maybe a job. And so the other thing that I think, certainly as a parent of 3 kids who are at the beginning of starting their careers, trying to instill in them this concept of, lifelong learning is a nice buzzword, but there's this career agility, right? The ball's going to move in terms of where opportunity is, and new tools usually have something to do with where those new opportunities come from. So how do you think in an agile basis? Like Udemy is a great platform that we make available to everyone here at the university, simply so people can reskill themselves around something that can make them a better employee in the job they have today, or be ready for the job they want tomorrow.
I was going to say we have time for 1 or 2 more questions, but you all may want to be here longer if that's a rain we're here. Georgie, who has the mic?
Hi, great panel today. I really appreciate all your insights. I'm a college professor, and for me, academic integrity is of the utmost importance. And if I write an article, it has to be in my own words, or else that's my reputation on the line. Of course, I use Grammarly, and I really like that, and I know that's AI as well, but at least it's making sure my grammar is good. I have a lot of students who are using AI, which is really frustrating to me, and it feels kind of like when the calculator came out. So I'm wondering, how do you think we can, as professors, we can instill in students how important it is to be able to write before you use AI, and also what directions or what implications do you think that this has for the future of education?
This is a tough one, right? Because first of all, you have colleagues on the campus who probably are at all different places on their views on this. I think there is, there's a core aspect of writing that a lot of people have expressed to me. They're really worried about this. If we turn these tools to today's students, they'll never learn how to write and communicate effectively on their own. They'll rely too much on the schools. And then the debate becomes, is that a bad thing, right? Do engineers build buildings that fall down because we gave them access to the text extension calculator? So I think it's going to be a really interesting debate. I'm not a faculty member, so I don't live this each and every day. What I do know is that our faculty is very thoughtful about how to make sure that the core skills that people need to become educated individuals and go out effectively lead independent lives, they care very deeply about those. And each professor has their own way of bringing that in. And then I guess what I've seen in just my time working in higher education is the things that pass the test of scrutiny of faculty from peer to peer are the things that become then commonplace versus niche oriented. But that will probably take us a decade to sort out around this, and we may think maybe even longer, I don't know. But I just think it'll take the process that we always need to vet these new tools on.
I don't know if this will help at all, but I teach a graduate class, and last summer I'm putting the syllabus together. I don't give exams. There's a group project. They break into groups, and one of my students is here right now. And they have a presentation, and then they have a final paper. And I thought, oh my gosh, with AI, they're going to be able to just write their whole paper. And so what I came up with was that they would have to have at least 2 interviews of professionals, people in the industry. And I think it turned out to be wonderful. Even if there was an AI, I wished I had done it years ago. Catherine, it was good. I mean, I think everybody got something out of it. And it broadened their perspective, and they had to look up some different things. So I don't know if that is germane to what you teach or anything, but I think it was a way for me to be comfortable with their papers.
Yeah, my sister's actually a professor as well at a university, and she's faced the same challenges. One of the things she has mentioned that she's done is provide 3 or 4 essays for the class and say, which one of these was AI generated? Forces them to be the ones to have to read through it, understand where AI makes mistakes, and where it might be not necessarily making a mistake, but pulling something that's completely from out of class and doesn't make sense to be within that paper, right? So she's turned that around a little bit. Now, obviously, you can't do that for everything, especially when you want to get them to write something. But it starts to paint that picture for them, right? And the way she looks at it at the end of the day is, if they've used GPT to build some of this, as long as they can represent everything that's in that page and understand what was on that paper, I'm okay with it.
Yep.
Good afternoon. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. I have a question that hasn't come up related to the financial industry. So I'd be interested in your insights on how that is going to evolve with AI, and also how we're going to secure our banking systems.
Sorry.
No, that's cool. So yeah, the financial industry has a lot of places where you're going to start seeing application of AI. As far as security, I think it's probably one of the better industries already. It's been under deep scrutiny since the beginning of the internet. So I'm not too worried about the security side within the financial industry. Unless you start talking about equity and bias again. That's where things will start to come up again. I think a lot of what you're going to see within the financial industry are things like investment predictions, analyses around all of that. They've already started leveraging a lot of those tools. I think the other thing that I'm excited to start seeing is the IRS, for example, starting to leverage that. You know, we had all those IRS agents and the funding cut there. It'd be nice if they had some software tools that could help them identify those same cheats that they were looking for, right? That's really where I think a lot of this is going to happen, is a lot of pattern recognition again, is looking for where things are happening, maybe identifying where money might be flowing out of an economy and where we're having these gaps to identify potential black markets and things like that. Again, that's really data analysis, and I think that's the biggest focus.
I've just been given the signal to end Q&A. I'm so sorry. But maybe one of our panelists will be around and can answer your question. I'd like, if all of you want to give a final remark under a minute, just hopes, dreams, fears, whatever you want to say about it. Dawn, can we start with you?
I think that this is just an evolving space. I mean, it's, you know, it feels like I think you mentioned the invention of the internet. It feels like
This is a real inflection point for our society. And I think just remaining familiar with the tools and informed and continuing, to push our knowledge, I think is essential.
Yeah, I'm still really excited to see where this all continues to go. Obviously, I've got concerns as well. I'm ready for the AI, but they won't be my overlord.
I think with me, it's like, there's this side of me that really understands the power of these tools, and like there's so much advancement that could be in the way that we live our lives. And then as someone who's been very much involved in topics like health equity and education, I really do see how this could create even wider divides between the haves and have-nots, especially in the United States, where we do kind of leave people to fend for themselves around these new ways of progress. So I think for me, it's like, there's kind of a tension of hopefulness and concern, and that's why I think we've got to really get parties to work together if we're going to get more benefit out of this than disbenefit. We will get both. It's just a question is what's the distribution of the two.
I'm going to call our president back up, but I want to thank you all so much. This was, I thought, incredibly interesting, and I still love AI.
Thank you, Sarah. Let's give a rousing thank you to this awesome panel. Sarah, Tom, Don, and Nathan. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Before you leave, please take a moment and thank the folks here at UCI and UCI Health for hosting us. What a great venue we were here at the Coulombe. And for coming to the meeting. And please join me in thanking the communications lab folks. Georgie's running around like Phil Donahue on the mic, and Alexandra and the team. I want to thank you. I know I dated myself. Thank you very much. Look at the color in my hair. Well, this is just the beginning. Talk about critical conversations, right? And this is just the first one of 2024. So I'd encourage all of you to keep on top of our programs and information. Go to ocforum.org and you'll have all the updates of all the different programs we're doing for the rest of the year. Thank you so much for joining us. Be safe driving out in the rain, and y'all have a great afternoon.